Welcome to the December 14th edition of the Beatdown Report, coming to you live on tape from Brick Cave Studios in fabulous Mesa, Arizona. We have a big show for you today. Big show. I know I say we always have a big show, but we do. This is an important show, I think. But let's just jump right in. I am actually exhausted. Not just by my recent trip to New England, where I attended the release party for the second poetry anthology that I'm in this year, Multiverse, an anthology of poems based on the idea of superheroism, or, in my case, supervillainy. And not exhausted, although it was fun, by the trip that I took to Lovecraft Country, the cities that H.P. Lovecraft used to pepper his fiction. Salem, Massachusetts, which is his inspiration for the town of Arkham, which is the home of the devilish Miskatonic University. I also went to Newburyport, which he called Innsmouth was a decidedly more twisted version of the town of Newburyport. If you're in Newburyport, by the way, there's a restaurant on, I think it's called State Street, and it's called 17, and oh man, it's good. You wouldn't think you'd find good New Orleans cooking in Newburyport, Massachusetts, but I had a crawfish etouffee, which was so good. But this is not a show about my dining experiences. This is not a show about me traipsing through New England. This is about the last 3 weeks in the United States. If you care at all about your fellow Americans, if you care at all about your fellow man, you should be pretty disheartened. So what we've had, it started off, there's always shit happening. I guarantee you, in your community, in your environs where you call home, that there's something bad going on. Something that is setting neighbor against neighbor, person against person. And maybe it's something insignificant. Maybe it's something small like a zoning dispute. Maybe it's something big. Murfreesboro, Tennessee. It's a little town, not super little, but it's not New York City. It's not Philadelphia, PA. It's not Chicago. It's basically just it's a town like many American towns, medium sized. People go to work, go to church. They also might go to not a church. And in the town of Murfreesboro, there's been a dispute, controversy over the local Muslim community trying to build a new mosque. And the locals, primarily conservative Republicans, have been fighting the building of this new mosque because they've been tossing around crazy arguments like Islam is not a religion, it's a political movement, that it's a terrorist training camp, blah, 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 blah. And so they've been fighting this mosque. And you can see the division in the community. You can see people who either don't really care, don't care, but they keep to themselves. They're, basically like, you want to worship, Allah? Fine, build it. I don't care. How does that affect me? And then there are people who actively want the mosque, the Muslims themselves, who are like, we would like a place to worship that, can accommodate our worshipers. And then you have people I put my hand to the right subconsciously, but it really is on the right side of the spectrum, who are basically shouting, go back to where you come from, which is an odd thing to say, considering that many of the Muslims who are there are from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. So they would like to go where they came from. They would like to stay in although I wouldn't. Probably the first thing I would do if I was in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, is I would look for ways to leave. I would probably like find what are the highways that'll get me out of this hillbilly town. And maybe, I'm sorry, I know I'm speaking as a cosmopolitan Phoenician. But so there are those things that divide the community. But no one's dying, thankfully. No, they did try to burn the mosque down. I'm sure some wonderful people with, most of their teeth, possibly using fuel from a jug that had 3 X's on it, that they then use later to play in a band. But no one's died. The same cannot be said of Ferguson, Missouri. Ferguson, Missouri is a town on the outskirts of St. Louis, which, as we know, as my friend David Tabor likes to say, St. Louis is the only city that has built a monument to leaving the city, the Gateway Arch, which is there to symbolize the westward expansion of the United States. But what's happened there is that a white police officer by the name of Darren Wilson stopped Michael Brown for reasons we don't know. Now, if the way that it has been spun is that Michael Brown had robbed a convenience store apparently for some Swisher Sweets, I think, some cigarillos, some tobacco product, I don't know. And when there was not like exactly an APB out for this guy, Michael Brown, by all accounts, was just walking down the street, and then Darren Wilson, the police officer, stopped him. Now, what happened, we don't fully know because there were no cameras on the situation. But what we do know is that a white cop who has said that he believed, I believe the word that he used to describe Michael Brown was demonic, and those were his words, was left standing while Michael Brown lay in the street dead. And as you can imagine, people who care about such things, which we would like to think would be all Americans, to why we question why an unarmed man was gunned down in the streets. And a grand jury was convened by a man, I believe his name is Bob McCullough. And this grand jury, after witnessing all the evidence, or not witnessing, reviewing all the evidence as presented to them, and as to hearing people testify, decided, hey, shooting an unarmed man in the street, that's A-okay. That's fine by us. And that is a really disheartening thing. Now, over at PBS has done a really fascinating chart. If you want to see it, I cannot stress this enough. You want to go to I'm not going to read the link because the link is too big, but search on Ferguson chart if you go to Google, and it will list you what all the evidence, not all of it obviously, because there was, this was a grand jury trial that took months, but it will list everything that's relevant, very germane to the shooting, and they list the eyewitnesses, and they don't give their names obviously because in grand jury those kind of things are protected. So they give them numbers: witness 10, witness 12, witness 12 number 2, witness 12 number 3. It explains it. Just you'll see when you get to the chart. But if you pause me real quick, if you want to look at it with me, are you paused? Have you unpaused it? Can I talk again? Can I talk, Mr. and Mrs. America? Is it okay? But no. Here is something really interesting. If you look at what the witness testimony says, and they have it in a handy chart form, one of the questions was, did Michael Brown put hands up when fired upon? And some people didn't know, so they weren't, they couldn't answer because they weren't witnessing that. They weren't there to testify to that part of the shooting. But of those who were, witness 14 number 1 said yes. Witness 14 number 2 said yes. Witness 16 said yes. Witness 16 number 2 said yes. Witness 22 said yes. Witness 35, witness 37, witness 41 number 1. I want to kind of read this all so you can get this. Witness 41 number 2, witness 42, witness 44, witness 44 number 2, witness 45, witness 46, witness 48 number 1, witness 64 on the second interview. Of the people who answered in the affirmative or in the negative, only one person said Michael Brown did not have his hands up when he was gunned down in the street. I'm sorry, and 2 people. Witness 10, sorry. So, regardless of whether or not Michael Brown charged Officer Darren Wilson, which, by the way, there's no evidence that happened. In fact, there are people who said he didn't. If you look at the chart, there are many people who said that he didn't charge at the officer. A man who has his hands up, a man who is surrendering. We, as a society, we believe that that person is then at that point, they have rights. I mean, they have rights when anyone has rights. I don't care if it's the worst terrorist in the world who's got a stick of C4 strapped to his body and he's walked into a kindergarten and he's got his hands on the button. He still has rights. We may not like that. We may want to wish that we lived in some action movie super land where the cops can dole out infinite justice, and it is justice when they do it, and that the good guys will always win, and the bad guys are easily identifiable, and the Constitution is just something that is talked over in conversations between people as exposition until we get to the next action scene. But that is not the world we live in. The world we live in is that the Constitution is there. It can make things messy, but everyone, every American, any person within the boundaries of the United States, be they a criminal, be they a citizen, be they an undocumented immigrant, regardless of whether or not they are within about whatever their status is, if they are in the United States, they are protected by the U.S. Constitution. Period. Stop. End. And what happened was Michael Brown's rights as an American citizen were taken from him in a hail of gunfire. It is so frustrating when you think about what could happen to any one of us. There's a poet by the name of Billy Tuggle from Chicago, Illinois, who I think put it up very succinctly. And I'm quoting him. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but basically it was, attention white people, officer friendly will shoot you too. And he's right. But having said that, I think it's important to realize that for African Americans, for Latinos, for people of color in this country, they are still dealing with the legacy of racism that this country has on it. I'm going to take a break here for a moment, and we're going to read an ad. I always find it odd to transition between something very serious. It's like the president, like Cronkite, like what? Like this is like November 23rd, 1963, and Cronkite's like, and the president has been shot in Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas, but now here's an ad for Lucky Strike. You know, do you enjoy the cool taste of a Lucky Strike? That is the worst Cronkite impersonation anyone has ever done. But we were going to do it. We're going to do ads because This show is not just this show is a money-making endeavor. We have made, what was the amount of money we made? 53 cents? We've made 53 cents on this show since we flipped over to monetized content on YouTube. So thank you, Beatdown Report listeners. And hey, coming up December 12th through the 14th, join Brick Cave Media at Phoenix Fan Fest at the University of Phoenix Glendale Stadium in fabulous Glendale, Arizona, west of the city of Phoenix. We're going to have Brick Cave authors, of which I am one, although I will not be on hand for this event. But Brick Cave authors will be on hand to just in time to autograph books for the holidays. I believe G.A. Giunta is going to be there, and J.M.M. Seep. I got it right. I got her name right. Yes, they'll both be there to autograph books, including Seep's book, The Trolls, which is a fun romp with a book for kids, a fantasy book for kids. It sounds wonderful. Like fantasy. If you're a fantasy fan, and you have kids who are also kind of into the Harry Potter. I don't know. I want to say Hunger Games, but Hunger Games isn't fantasy. Hunger Games is Alice in Wonderland. That's close. It's actually very close to Alice in, well, not close to Alice in, but it's in the same kind of portmanteau of literature, as I'm using that word right, I think. But anyway, let's get back to the show. So yeah, what we have are basically witnesses who identified Darren Wilson shooting down dead Michael Brown unarmed in the street, and the grand jury said, "Hey, that's just fine." And it is hard as an American to look at what happened and say, and not want to. I've seen there's a hashtag that's been going around, and a lot of people have been using it, and it's hashtag burn it all down. And some people are taking it literally. Some people are speaking metaphorically, but regardless, if you see a system so corrupt, if you see a system so fucking skewed against people of color, especially African American men in this country, whether it's sentencing disparities, whether it's if it's sentencing disparities, the rates of incarceration, unemployment, everything that you look at in this country right now points to an ongoing, continuing disparity, gap, gulch, whatever you want, whatever space in between two things you want to call it, between African Americans and white people in this country. And if you give a damn about those kind of things, and you should, what do? It's so frustrating. And that people do not understand. I think white people don't understand. One of the things I heard a lot of was in post Ferguson decisions, talking about the riots. Why are they burning down their own towns? Why are they burning down their own neighborhoods? And I think the best response to that is a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., where he said, "A riot is the language of the unheard." If you are, it's almost analogous to when you look at the Palestinians and why do people become suicide bombers? Why do people give up? Why do people burn themselves alive? Like there was the famous case of the monk in Vietnam who set himself on fire. Why do people do that? When you have nothing left but your own body, when you have nothing left but the rubble around you, that is the only weapon you have. That is the only way that you can make yourself be heard. I will not stand in judgment of people who take to the streets after witnessing social injustice and burn their own neighborhoods down. I don't get it. there was the Great South Park, when they were trying to discuss the parameters of what the N-word meant to white people, and Stan, I believe, says to his friend Token at the end of the show, I don't get it. White people, we don't get it. We don't understand. We will never have the experience of what it's like to be a black man in this country. So what I'd like to say, what I'd like to suggest, I'd like to make a modest proposal to white people everywhere, is just shut up for a little while. Now, I'm not saying don't be heard. I'm not saying don't engage. I'm not saying don't engage, but what I'm saying is let the conversation on this be driven by the people who are suffering under the yoke of this legacy of racism. And it's going to be hard. And I know it's ironic that I'm doing this from a podcast, but this is kind of the last thing I'll talk about on today's the last show I'm going to talk about this, unless there's a pressing need. Because trust me, there are more than enough voices out there that you can listen to. I might recommend one, Scott Woods. He's on Twitter. Scott Woods Says is his handle. He is a Brick Cave author, and he's an African-American. He's a poet. He's a librarian. And I say that only with the librarian thing, because I think librarians, honestly, I think librarians are the coolest people around. They hand out knowledge. They give you access to knowledge for free, other than what you pay for their salaries and tax dollars, which, trust me, librarians don't make a hell of a lot of money. I don't know that you've ever met a rich librarian, but listen to people. Listen to people who are outside of your close, a friend of mine once put it, said to me, who are your real friends? When you say you're a white person and you have black friends, a black friend is someone you invite over on a regular basis. A friend is someone you invite over on a regular basis, that you go out and say, hey, let's go see a movie, let's go grab a drink, that you invite to your wedding, that you let babysit your kids. You may have black acquaintances. You may have, and some of you are going to have black friends. I'm not disputing the idea that people can't be friends, but don't stop the tokenization. I think, and this sounds like touchy-feely bullshit, earthy, crunchy stuff that I would normally just say, fuck off. I might say fuck off, hippie, but listen to what your African-American friends have to say. Listen to what people of color have to say. Listen to the Latino man on the radio. Listen to the Latino man on the street. Read news sources that come from outside the big three, CNN, MSNBC, Fox. Find alternative sources of media. Talk, listen, and then talk to them. And then talk to them. Call into radio shows. But don't say, for God's sake, don't say, well, what I think you need to do is... Because guess what? Minority communities have been hearing what white people have been saying to do to them, let's be honest, for years. They don't need you at this moment in time telling them. Let's listen to some voices who are not taking my advice. And this comes to us from our friends at People for the American Way, Right Wing Watch. This is a conversation between former Arkansas governor and Fox News talking drone Mike Huckabee and former Arizona Congressman J.D. Hayworth. Now, if I can just set this up real quick, J.D. Hayworth is possibly one of the worst members of Congress, one of the most unqualified dipshits ever to put on a flag lapel pin. And he lost his thing. He had a radio show in Arizona that he got kicked off of because he started to run against John McCain, and then he couldn't get his job back. And eventually he got hired because what did J.D. Hayworth, what was his job before he became a politician? He was a sportscaster. So again, he fills up the screen. Like if you look at a camera shot of JD Hayward, he's got like this massive brick of a head and these shoulders that look like they belong on like some like plains animal, like a buffalo. And he's just he's like, if you wanted to build a parody of a sportscaster from scratch, like Dr. Frankenstein, JD Hayworth is what you'd wind up with. But he's interviewing Mike Huckabee, and what does Mike Huckabee have to say?
You have not been shy in offering some criticisms of what has gone on in Ferguson. Would you like to expand on some of those thoughts?
Well, first of all, I find it just incredibly dangerous that you have members of Congress on the floor of Congress holding up their hands in the hands up, don't shoot position, as if to say that somehow that is going to get you shot. I'm going to tell you something.
Well, let's pause there. Hey, Governor Mike Huckabee, guess what? It did get you shot. It got, well, not you, because you're a fattened off the trough of Roger Ailes' cash flow talking head, former governor, white, of a southern state. Yeah, putting your hands up wouldn't get you shot. It might get me shot. Definitely got Michael Brown shot.
What gets you shot is when you grab a police officer's gun and you lunge at him.
Okay, now let's parse that statement real quick. Did Michael Brown reach for the gun? And sorry, we kind of moved away from that page there. Did Michael Brown reach into or otherwise directly interact with a police car? Now, most of the witnesses there say yes. But did he put his hands at his waist? Most of the witnesses, actually, they're divided on that. So Huckabee is basically just talking bullcrap. He doesn't know. But again, what we do know, what most of the witnesses have said, is that Michael Brown had his hands up when he was shot. Let's go back to the gov.
And you try to hit him in the face. And this.
Now let's talk about that real quick. I forgot to mention this. This is something I really, really wanted to talk about. One of the huge right-wing memes that happened after Michael Brown was after Michael Brown was gunned down was that Darren Wilson, the police officer, was grievously wounded. And there's a website by the name of Wonket, and they have an ongoing feud with this man, who I'm going to mention in a minute. They refer to him as the stupidest person on the internet. And I think that's disingenuous, because I think Jim Hoff is actually very smart. What I think he is a lying son of a bitch who makes money off of web clicks off his website because he likes to back up and spread scurrilous right-wing memes, which he did. And I say this without equivocation. He put up a picture of a man who had his eye socket shattered. The guy looks really fucked up. If you look at the picture that Jim Hoff of Gateway Pundit, stupidest man on the internet, put out there, was that there's a man lying in a hospital bed and his right eye socket is absolutely just messed up. Like I can't even imagine how much pain you would be in from having your face that fucked up. And people were looking at it, it's like, oh, look, Michael Brown beat the shit out of Darren Wilson. Darren Wilson was in fear for his life. He must have been in so much pain, blah, 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 blah. Look at the picture. And I'm sure if you have a right-wing grandparent or a right-wing uncle and you're a liberal, progressive-minded person, I'm sure that this piece of shit got put into your inbox as an email forward. Well, guess what? That was not Officer Darren Wilson. No, what that was a snowboarder. That's right. A fucking snowboarder who wiped out, maybe trying to do a sick 360 ollie half axle off of a half pipe at Vail. I don't know. I don't fucking care about extreme sports. The fact that more people don't wind up with shattered eye sockets for jumping off a cliff is nothing that is short of amazing. But the point of the matter is, this picture that was forwarded was a goddamn lie. Because when they released the photos from the grand jury, Officer Darren Wilson looked like he could have come out of a goddamn recruiting poster for Pink Cheek. I don't know. Not sure what I was going for there. But Officer Darren Wilson had a... you couldn't even tell that he had gotten it from anything that he had done on the day job. I look like that sometimes after I sleep on my pillow wrong. So what we know is that basically Officer Darren Wilson was not grievously injured and definitely didn't have his orbital fucking bones shattered in his face, as these right-wing dickbags wanted you to believe. I'm going to finish this thought real quick. And then we might have to do another ad break as everyone in the recording studio is looking at me expectantly. It is so screwed up how these lies get spread on the right wing. How they become fact. It's just so frustrating that you because people believe it. People believe it all the time. And that's the danger of the modern media, because there is no quality control. It's just we'll talk about that in a minute. We're also going to finish up with Governor Huckabee's comments. But anyway, let's take a break. We'll be back in a jiff, or a Peter Pan peanut butter if you prefer. And we're back. Speaking of Peter Pan, just real quick, did you? I did not see it. I did not see the live Peter Pan musical on NBC. But I heard that it was awful. I mean, and I could see how it would be awful. I love Christopher Walken, but he's not Captain Hook. He's just not Captain Hook. But anyway, let's get back to Governor Huckabee. Let's see what else what the Gov has to say.
Nonsense that telling young people, don't hold up your hands because that's going to get you in trouble. And instead, I guess what they're teaching them is go loot a store, beat up a cop, reach for his gun, hope you get it before he does. This is not only foolish and dangerous, but it's really on the verge of anarchy. And I'm...
Good God. Yes. By putting your hands up to signify that you don't want to get shot, gunned down in the street like a dog, that's obviously telling kids, go loot a store, go beat up a cop, go take his gun. By the way, the beat up part didn't happen, and the gun, no one really knows what happened there. And he may not even rob the store. I actually haven't investigated this, and I feel bad, but I have been traveling, and I haven't had a chance to watch it. But apparently, there was some video roaming around where, and whether it's true or not, I'm not, because I was just railing against how there's very little quality control. So, if you're listening to this, stop, do the work yourself. But there may be video of Michael Brown actually paying for what he took out of the store. And again, I don't know if that's true or not. I'm saying I'm not no one way or the other. I just don't know, because I haven't had a chance to do the requisite investigation. But the problem is when Huckabee says something like this, which is bolstered by what Jim Hoff said with the broken face bones, is that there's no quality control. No one's going to fire. Jim Hoff is not going to fire himself. He's not going to let himself go from Gateway Pundit. Roger Ailes doesn't give a shit if Mike Huckabee talks this borderline racist trash, because this just makes money for Roger Ailes. It just makes money for Fox News. When you are enraged and you watch someone on TV, when you get really pissed off at something Huckabee says or Bill O'Reilly says, and you watch that show the day after the next show, you're making Fox News money, because all the advertisers know that people are going to be watching, so the Fox gets to jack up its rates for the ads. And that's a whole other thing. That's the corporatization of media and then the loss of journalistic integrity and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I could literally talk about this for hours. But let's go back to Huck.
Just
whoops, that was my phone.
Disgusted that you have NFL players, politicians, and others who, no matter what the evidence reveals, no matter how many sworn testimonies show, that Darren Wilson, who it's a tragedy that the young man got shot. But this is a young man who had just roughed up a store owner, just robbed a store, and now he's going after a cop's gun. And it's a horrible thing that he was killed, but he could have avoided that if he'd have behaved like something other than a thug.
Oh, really? Oh. God damn it. You know, you look at that, you hear that, and it sounds, if you were in a vacuum, if you were somewhere in outer space on a planet that you had just appeared on and you were given that advice, you'd say, okay, makes sense. But we don't live on a planet in outer space. Well, I guess we do. We live on Earth, which is technically in outer space. But this is the planet we live on. And in this country, in the United States, if you're an African American man, what do you have to do to not get killed by the cops? Michael Brown's acting like a thug. Okay, let us, and I'm conceding it only for the sake of this thought experiment. Let's say that he was get shot. Okay. What about Eric Garner in New York? Eric Garner had his hands up and was basically telling the cops, I'm sick of you harassing me. Gets put in a chokehold for the crime of saying, I'm sick of you harassing me. And is choked to death. Well, don't act like a small business owner. Don't act like a man who's upset with the fact that he keeps getting hassled by the cops. Then there was that poor man, I forget his name at the moment, and but he was walking from his house in his apartment building, innocent, having done nothing. Not the cops were there. The cop got startled, and the cop's response was to pull out the gun and shoot him. Well, they say, don't walk outside when black. And you know what's probably going to happen? I'm sure it would take us 5 minutes to find a story of an innocent African American man who was in his own house who got shot dead. I'm gonna keep talking, but I'm gonna Google that and see if I can find something real quick. See how long it takes me. Let's get the clock running here. Okay, I typed in black man shot in house innocent. Oh, look at that. It took me a total of 30 seconds. And that's with my producer's slow-ass internet connection on this laptop. I could probably have found it. I could have probably found it faster. Here we go. Man dies in police raid on wrong house. This is from the ABC News, happened in Lebanon, Tennessee. A 61-year-old man was shot to death by police while his wife was handcuffed in another room during a drug raid on the wrong house. Police admitted their mistake, saying faulty information from a drug informant contributed to the death of John Adams Wednesday night. They intended to raid the home next door. The two officers have been paid on administrative leaves. So you can't even sit in your own house without getting shot. What is wrong with this country? What is wrong with this country? You know, everything from Crispus Attucks, who was shot dead in the Boston massacre, to the massacre at Rosewood, Emmett Till. I mean, there is a litany of crimes in this country perpetuated on people for the sole indignity, if you want to call it that, which I don't, but I'm sure some people would, of being not white. And it's not just Black Americans. It's Latino Americans. It's Native Americans. It's Asian Americans. You know, and yes, I hear the rumblings of the right-wing uncles of this nation banding together and saying, well, white men get shot too. Why don't you talk about that? Yeah, white men get shot too. Bravo. You have poked a hole in my argument. You have made me see the light. I understand now. It's not just blacks. It's everyone getting shot by the cops. Oh, thank you, right-wing uncles. Your forwards have made me want to join the Tea Party. No, sorry. There are abuses by police all over the country. White, black, brown, Native, Asian, whatever. But if you add the racial element, which you have to when looking at policing in this country, how can you look at this? How can you say that there is not a disproportion? There is not. How can you look at the Ferguson case? How can you look at the death of Michael Brown when you see all the shit that gets poured down from right-wing punditry, from fake photographs, to complaining about the Rams players who held their hands up when they walked onto the field? How can you look at that and not say there is not a racial animus? I don't. It boggles. It boggles the mind. Trying to bring something up. Here we go. All right, now let's talk about Pat Buchanan. Let's talk about America's favorite Nazi sympathizer. Now, you may think that you think, oh, Klute, you just broke Godwin's law. Pat Buchanan, he's an American. He's not a Nazi sympathizer. All it takes, again, let's go to Google. Let's go to Google one more time. I'm going to type up, when I get to Google, I'm waiting for it. Apparently a plugin, Shockwave Flash, is not working. That's fine. We'll work around that. We'll work around the Flash plugin, which is preventing it from Google. Okay, anyway, go to Google and put in Pat Buchanan Nazi sympathizer. How many hits are you going to get? You're going to get a shit ton of hits. Why? Because Pat Buchanan is a Nazi sympathizer. I remember he wrote in one of his autobiographies that he and his father used to sit around the dinner table and discuss the virtues of Francisco Franco in Spain. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, Francisco Franco was an authoritarian fascist who restricted the civil rights of people, murdered his own countrymen. I guess he did one good thing. He did inspire Pablo Picasso to paint Guernica by ordering his planes to bomb the innocent town of Guernica in the middle of the night. But hey, what's a little murder if we get a wonderful painting like Guernica? Anyway, this is Pat Buchanan. What does Pat Buchanan have to say? I'm sure it'll be good.
Happened here is that a town, Ferguson, Missouri, right next to a town where I lived in, Jennings next door, where Darren Wilson came from. This town has been slandered and demonized and has been portrayed as some sort of racist hellhole when neither the cops nor Darren Wilson nor the city have done anything to deserve this. You had the President of the United States.
Well, okay, they didn't do anything to deserve it except gun down an innocent black man.
States sitting up at the UN talking about what horrible things are going on in Ferguson, Missouri, in our own country.
Yes, because we have to kind of acknowledge the fact that if America wants to be the shining city on the hill, which I hope, Pat, if you're listening to the show, and you're probably not, but if you are, I hope you appreciate the irony of me using the phrase shining city on the hill.
Yeah, the Attorney General of the United States go out there and slander that place.
Yes, we have to slander that place because we're not slander. It's not slander if you're pointing out factual evidence that this country needs a change. This country needs to be pushed forward away from the racial divides that are being perpetuated by people like Pat Buchanan.
And call for a wholesale investigation of the Ferguson police. What in heaven's name have the Ferguson police ever done to deserve what has been done to them?
They gunned down an innocent man in the street, Pat.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're in the media. You are part of the media, as am I. I got to tell you, I mean, they've done disgusting things, double standard, you name it, throughout the years, forcing people to lose their jobs on the right when they wouldn't lose them on the left.
TV host
but
Steve
they
Maltzberg.
have this narrative that they will not let go of. I mean, if you watch the commentator now, you can't believe the cop. We need a new grand jury, this and that. The stepfather who might be charged.
Well, okay, now let's talk about the grand jury thing for a minute. Well, the grand jury by District Attorney McCullough, apparently, and this has come out from the St. Louis Police, by the way, the St. Louis Police Union head, I think, has said that basically the trial was a show trial, that the district attorney never intended to present the evidence in a way that would have resulted in an indictment for the officer. That he was basically doing it because he had to, because people from the media were paying attention. How disgusting is that? When you think of this old Soviet Union, when you think about the abuses of that regime, one of the things that they did was that they would hold show trials. They would bring people up on charges of things like, infant cannibalism during the siege of Stalingrad and stuff like that. Things that they had heinous crimes that they had nowhere near, in the ballpark of committing. They didn't even eat like a pork chop when they were accused of human cannibalism. But these trials, the verdict was always known ahead of time. The person was guilty, but they needed to have a trial to make the people feel good about, that justice was being served, that a person was being person who was evil was being rightfully convicted. And what we have now in America are opposite show trials. We have show trials to prove to everyone that the government is doing its job, and then we let the guilty go because justice has been served, because jurisprudence has been satisfied. And that's, if a trial is rigged from the start, it's not a justice. And we have to, and I hope and I pray that the federal Justice Department does something about this. I'm done with Pat Buchanan. Fuck that guy. So let's go to the case of Eric Garner. Eric Garner was the second black man in America who was on trial for his life after he had already been murdered by the police. This one was... People have said, well, maybe we would know the truth about what happened in Ferguson, Missouri, had the officers been wearing body cams, had Darren Wilson been wearing a body cam. And maybe the evidence would have been so incontrovertible that even Bob McCullough, I keep calling him Bob, I don't know if that's his actual first name, but District Attorney McCullough had brought him up on charges, would have had to have. But Eric Garner, if you don't know, this is shorthand of the case. He was a shop owner in Staten Island, which is a borough of New York City. He had been apparently selling loose cigarettes. And the cops were like, hey, you're breaking the law, selling loose cigarettes, which is illegal in New York City. And apparently it's like a minor infraction. It's like a ticket normally. And Eric Garner made the mistake, if you can call it a mistake, of telling the cops he was tired of it. I believe his last words were, sadly, his last words were, I can't breathe. But before he was being murdered by the police, his last words were, this ends today, or this ends now. And so after telling the cops that he was tired of their harassment, the cops decided that they needed to choke him to death. And the body cam thing. Body cams are not the only evidence. I believe my friend and author Scott Woods, who I made the thing earlier about let's take a break real quick. I want to kind of keep this on the thought train going. Let's take another ad here. One of the books that you can get at Phoenix Fan Fest is The Healer's Legacy by Sharon Skinner. She's a Brick Cave Media author. So what's the Healer's Legacy about? You're asking me, Klute. Well, orphaned by war, haunted by unknown origins, and chased by a warlord and his army of brutal soldiers, Kira is a young woman with a secret. She can physically communicate with animals. She is also on the run from her abusive mate Toril, the hero turned warlord, who led the country's forces to victory against the Outland Raiders. Only that was before the love of power consumed him. Now his only focus is tracking down Kira and making her punishment an example of his power. But the quest for freedom isn't the only struggle Kira faces. She must also come to terms with her past choices, whose echoes drive her present. And now, the future of the land and the people she has come to love depends on the decisions she will be forced to make. And that's The Healer's Legacy by Sharon Skinner. Sharon and The Healer's Legacy will be appearing at Phoenix Fan Fest at University of Phoenix Glendale on sometime. Go to brickcavemedia.com to get the full schedule of authors' appearances. But she'll be there. The book will be there. You can get it signed, and then you can gift it to someone, perhaps maybe even yourself. But so going back to what I was saying, Scott Woods is a friend of mine. He lives in Columbus, Ohio. I like to think that if we were close, or in geography, we'd be closer, hanging out more often. But as it stands, I think I'm comfortable in calling him a friend. But he made a very good point. When people were saying, well, and just real quick, what would happen was that the officer who choked Eric Garner to death was brought up on charges for the grand jury. And the grand jury from Staten Island, now let's be clear, Staten Island is to New York City, like Brooklyn, Manhattan, the Bronx, Harlem, is to Orange County as it relates to LA. It is very conservative. It is whiter than the other boroughs. It's working class, you have to be tried by a jury of your peers. In this case, it wasn't a trial by jury; it was a grand jury. But when you have Staten Island, your jury pool is going to skew white, as this one did, and they did not find the officer who murdered Eric Garner to death guilty, or they didn't indict him. It didn't even get to a jury trial. So the thing was caught on camera. There was no doubt. There was zero doubt as to what happened. But the people who looked at this tape, and they said basically, no, that's fine. We expect that to happen. And the body cams, the camera did make a difference here. And Scott Woods made a very good point. Scott Woods said that it did make a point. It didn't make a difference in this case. But we have to understand the power of the camera eye, as he said. And this is Scott. I'm paraphrasing what he has said. Scott said, look at what happened in the 60s. It wasn't body cams, but it was cameras. It was cameras that brought the injustice of what the Southern sheriffs and what the Southern politicians, the white politicians, were doing to black Americans, that they were turning dogs on them, that they were turning the hoses on them. And Americans in the North and Americans in the East and the Americans in the West wouldn't have known that had it not been for the television cameras. We would not be outraged right now if we did not see, hopefully we'd be outraged, but I think the larger ball of outrage wouldn't be as big if we hadn't seen with our own eyes this poor man, Eric Garner, get choked to death by the New York City Police Department. And we wouldn't feel perhaps as strongly the outrage if we hadn't seen it with our own eyes. Because again, on this one, so many of the right-wing columnists and political pundits and Twitter jerks are saying that, yeah, it wasn't just what happened to Eric Garner. Well, good. We got him on board finally. We got it. All it took was a videotape of a man being choked to death to get the right wing on board and talk about, injustice. And boy, isn't everything great. And then they say stupid shit still about this. They say that the attack on Eric Garner wasn't racially motivated, that the problem was because there's too many taxes and too many regulations. That if Eric Garner had been not selling loose cigarettes, if there wasn't a law against selling loose cigarettes, then Eric Garner would still be alive. And that is absolute and utter horseshit. And if you are turning the death of this man by the police, a white police officer attacking a black man, about your Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, going galt horseshit, get the fuck out of my country. And I hate to say that because that makes me sound like I'm them. Like I am some dipshit Tea Partier, Randian, tri-corner hat wearing with tea bags hanging off of it douchebag. I'm not. But I get the source of rage. I get the pure source of rage that they must feel all the time. Although they feel it about stuff that's horseshit, like taxes or giving other people health care. I reserve my rage for the unjust death of men disproportionately in this country by people of color. Or of people of color. It's been I'm shaking the table right now. I'm literally like quaking with rage right now. And I don't know a solution. I don't have an answer. I wish I did. I wish there was some way that I could come down from the mountain like Moses with stone tablets that would probably be carried by other people, because I've walked down Mount Sinai and I walked up Mount Sinai literally. And it's a hard climb, and I can't imagine doing it with stone tablets without a trail, because I don't think anyone carved a trail for Moses before he went up there. But I don't have an answer. I don't know I don't know how to solve this. Because again, for black men in this country, sitting quietly, legally in your own home is not safe enough. Relying on the justice system right now isn't working. There's a poet, Ed Mabry, who once told me about poems that, you need to not do a rant when you do a poem. You need to give purpose. You need to offer a solution. You need to say things. And I just don't know other than ranting, I don't know what to do at this point. You can vote for politicians who are hopefully going to be on the side of the angels. You can not support businesses that support racist and racial policies. Although, again, these days those are hidden. You don't know until the owner of the business sends out something stupid in an email forward. You can talk to people. You can try to educate them. You can respond back to your right-wing uncles with their email forwards. You can talk to them about the truth of what actually happened and hope to change their minds. But I go back. It's sad. I have to go back to advice. I'm not sad because I have to go back to advice my father gave me, because my father's a very wise man. But the advice that he gave is sad. And what he said is that change never really happens until the older generations die. He says that people have an obligation to die, because when they go, they take their terrible ideas with them. And we've gotten marginally better as a country. We've gone from slavery to Jim Crow to this tepid mix of pretend that equality is a thing in this country. So maybe it's gotten better. I don't know. I wouldn't. Oh man, I'm leaving this on a downer. We should do something fun. Oh, I know. If I have a homily for today, it's basically just don't be a dick. Listen to people of color. Listen to marginalized communities. See what they have to say before you open your mouth and say something stupid. And hopefully I didn't do that today. Hopefully I didn't embarrass myself. I didn't say anything dumb on this show. You never know. You never know. All right. You know what that noise means? It means we have gotten through another edition of the Beatdown Report. I was your host for the day. My name is the Klute. I hope I did something. I hope I reached someone today. Won't know. Maybe until I die, and maybe not even then. Anyway, my name is the Klute. I was your host. Our producer in the studio, as always, is Johnny Skinner. Thanks for another amazing job. Our PR person and Beatdown Report production meeting chef, Jen LaBuzz, who made a delicious quinoa vegetable casserole today. Bob Nelson is our executive producer. Our podcast is currently hosted by Podbean, but for how much longer? Our live streaming was brought to you today by Ustream.com. Our theme is brought to you by the late, great Raymond Scott. The song is Sampled, as we call it, and it is Powerhouse. Also, there is a link on the page to donate money to. Go to beatdownreport.podbean.com, click on the donate link up at the left-hand corner. It'll get money to us. And you can also now catch us on YouTube, where your clicks have given us 53 cents. Let's see if we can push that up to $1 by the end of the next show. What do you say? What do you say, people? All right, I'm out of here. Be good to everyone, because we don't have much choice. We're stuck on this planet until we die. Love y'all. Adios.